Hey, welcome back. Second Star right here, talking some more Raid Shadow Legends. And today I want to talk about a rare healer that is not Apothecary. Why, do you ask? If you have Apothecary, isn't that all you need? Well, yeah, maybe. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, what if you don't have an Apothecary and you want a healer? Right? There's got to be other options out there. I did not get an Apothecary until after my 90-day final login reward was long gone. I didn't get one. I didn't get a Kale until a couple weeks ago, right? So, I mean, RNG is a weird beast that we need to manage, and sometimes the best is not available to us. So, I was looking through my champion list and looking at Discord and seeing what people are talking about, and it seems like there's a champion that people talk about a lot, but they don't necessarily use a lot, or at least I don't necessarily see in use a lot, and I certainly don't see it in the arena, and I don't really hear people talking about her in dungeon progression. So I want to just see how this champion works and how they compares to healers that people use in general. And when I say healers that people use in general, I just mean Apothecary, right? There's other healers than Apothecary. I'm well aware of this, but I think as far as rares go, probably every rare healer people will come across, eventually. But I don't necessarily think that they'll come across a lot of the epics and legendaries that people might use more in place of Apothecary. All right, so let's talk about Hexweaver. All the good things, all the bad things that can be, as the story goes. What we'll notice as we go through her skills is how remarkably similar she is to Apothecary in the way her skills are set up. We have an A1 that is not multi-hit like Apothecary's is. So while I don't want to just make this a comparison with Apothecary, I'm going to kind of make this a comparison with Apothecary because that's kind of everyone's default. And I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that people consider Apothecary one of the best healers in the game, maybe even one of the best overall champions in the game. I don't know if it's too controversial to say that. But Apothecary gets a lot of use, and Hexweaver doesn't get as much play, so let's find out why. Alright, so not a multi-hit A1, so that immediately gives Apothecary more utility in Fire Knight, whereas Hexweaver would maybe struggle there. Okay, so attacks one enemy and has a 50% chance of placing a 25% decreased accuracy buff for 2 turns. And that debuff chance can get up to 35, 45, 50%. Okay, now the problem is it's decreased accuracy. And I always consider decreased accuracy to be a low-end debuff. And I think part of the problem with that is that you can't see it in action. Right? I mean, you can place the debuff. You see the debuff flag goes up on your opponent, but you don't really know what it does. You can't see it. And you don't get an immediate feedback from the game that tells you, hey, the boss missed his debuff on you because you decreased his accuracy, or in arena or wherever. You don't get any feedback, so you don't know that it's working, so it feels weak. So I think kind of that might be part of the problem with the skill, is just there's no feedback to make you know that it's working. So that's why I think I consider it weak, and maybe other people feel the same way I do. I don't know. But so that makes her seem a little bit weaker already. The Dark Embrace, okay, heals all allies by 15% of their max hit points. And this scales up another 30%, and then the cooldown gets it down from 4 turns to 3 turns. But here's the thing. It's an AoE heal. So it's different, whereas Apothecary is a 35% spot heal with that can crit. So you get one big heal that you can do every 2 turns if you book it down. Right, where she has a smaller heal, a much smaller heal, but it's for the entire party. And here's another thing, and this counts to any healer, is that healing is not additive, it's multiplicative. And this is a really irritating concept, but the fact of the matter is healing scales much differently than DPS. If this was a DPS skill, you would just add in those percentages to your damage and you would do that much more damage. With healing, it doesn't work that way. Rather than this being, a plus 45% heal after it's all booked, it's not. It's still a base 15% heal. But what happens is you'll do your 15% heal, and then the level 2 will add 10% to that heal. Right, so if you healed for 3,000, you'd actually heal for 3,300. Then on the next level, it'd be 10% on top of that, and then 10% on top of that. So you're adding 10% to that 15% after the heal goes into effect. It's kind of a hassle. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but I think they just do it because our hit point pools are much smaller than our opponent's hit point pools, so that's why DPS and healing works differently. That's my assumption anyway. Okay, so we see this just works differently than Apothecary's. It's an AoE heal for everybody that's smaller than Apothecary's spot heal every 2 turns, and then this is 3 turns. Wings of Doom is her speed booster. She places a 30% crit rate buff and a 50% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns, whereas Apothecary's is speed and turn meter. So a little bit different. Then she has the bad faction crypt aura, whereas Apothecary has a much more useful defensive aura in dungeons. Alright, so that's the skill breakdown between the 2 of them. And I suppose it would be a little bit remiss if we didn't just mention just how adorable she is. I mean, isn't she adorable? Look at her. She's getting ready to go to goth prom, and she's got like a TIE fighter in her head. I don't know what the deal is there, but man, she's about ready to go on a night out on Dark Elf Town. Just great character design. She's really cool looking. But let's go over Masteries real quick. I wanted to set them the same as my Apothecary, so I just really cared about these first 2 big heals, right? Lay on Hands and Healing Savior. And then, of course, neither champion places debuffs, so I figured Steadfast for extra hit points would be fine. A little bit of extra healing with the Exalted Death, and then made them both tanky with some tough skin and some rejuvenation. You know, why not? My Apothecary was actually a little bit further ahead on the Mastery tree. I've been working on it a little bit, so I just undid his Masteries. No big deal. I can reset them later, and just to make them pretty even. Also, their skills, I made them, their artifacts, gear, all pretty much the same. I made their stats as close as I could possibly get it without going too crazy with gear rearranging. Apothecary has a little bit more hit points, a little less defense, and Hexweaver has more defense and less hit points. Apothecary has a crit advantage because I geared him for crit because of his skill crit heal. So that's why he has a little bit more crit, but I figured, that'll all come out in the wash, as they say, as we run through some tests. Alright, so I ran them first through Ice Golem's 10, which is the first level you get as you're progressing, where you don't have to get 3-star gear anymore. So I figured that was a good place to start, and they both handled it like champs. There wasn't really any issues getting through that dungeon with either healer. So this is Hexweaver I have in 11, and things start to get a little bit dicey here, and she has an affinity advantage in this dungeon too. So she has a bit of advantage over Apothecary in that regard. And the team composition is no one has any lifesteal gear. There's no supplemental healing going on. Everything is just up to Hexweaver to keep them alive. Except for Bellower. Bellower has like 1 immortal set or something on it. Ridiculous. So it didn't really count. It doesn't really affect his ability to stay alive or be killed any quicker. I don't actually think. So, and then I also have, they're all DPS, except for Lord Chamfort, who is an HP based character. That's really the only difference. And I was using Longbeard at first for his crit rate aura, but in this dungeon he ended up killing everybody every time, because invariably he would do his ally attack while the 2 minions were up, and then my Frigid Vengeance would have the ignore defense and more damage, and it would kill everybody. And it was actually kind of funny because it happened over and over and over again. It was very entertaining. So what happens is she's doing her Dark Embrace, and she's healing everybody, and she's actually pretty smart about it. She won't do it if it's available if people will just have like more than 75% of their hit points. She'll actually save it, and she'll either attack or do her speed boost instead. So I think that's pretty good, because sometimes the AI in this game is super wonky, but it's actually pretty good here. Longbeards, like I was just saying, his AI was very bad. But I also had Harvest Jack in here in the place of Lord Chamfort, and his AI was really good too. He would not do any AoE while the 2 minions were up, which I thought was very interesting. He would just do single target attacks, so it wouldn't endanger the rest of the party, which was pretty cool, or endanger himself, because even when he was the last person alive, and I'll talk about that in a second, he still wouldn't do it. He was very careful to keep himself, not do anything that would endanger himself unnecessarily. Okay, so now they're in they're in the race to see who's going to survive, the final 2 people here or the Ice Golem, and this is where things got interesting in my testing purposes. I'll spoiler alert right now: the healer's going to die, but Lord Chamfort is going to stay alive and beat everybody. When I ran this with Apothecary, the exact same thing happened. I mean, the healing went exactly the same. It wasn't the exact same numbers, right? Of course, because his spot healer is different, and so he was healing Lord Chamfort 4 more, but than Hexweaver was. But the end result was the same. He died. Apothecary died. Lord Chamfort came through like a boss and defeated the Ice Golem, and everything was just hunky dory. But then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's because Lord Chamfort is so beastly, as a hit point based champion. Maybe that was the issue. So I put in Harvest Jack. The exact same thing transpired. Everyone died towards the end. The healer kept Harvest Jack alive for a little bit. Hexweaver died. Harvest Jack kept going. Apothecary died. Harvest Jack kept going. Killed the boss. Like, okay, maybe because they're legendaries and they're just really good, that this is what happened. So I went and I put in Woad Painted. All right, okay, Woad Painted. I think everyone knows that Woad Painted is a very, very sorry champion. But I had a level 51, and I did that specifically to see if Woad Painted actually had any utility anywhere. Like, I don't want to think of it as, this champion's bad, just discard them. I'm like, this champion's bad, but do they do anything good? Well, they can stay alive in Ice Golems 11 after everyone dies, I guess. Because the 3 hit point champions that I tested, they all stayed alive past everyone, and they ended up killing the boss. Take that for what it will. Maybe the lesson that we can learn from that is that we're all undervaluing our hit point based champions. But I digress. The point was, can these healers get through with no support, no additional healer, no champions that have healing skills on their own, no healing gear, no shielding gear, no nothing. It was just straight, can the healer, Apothecary or Hexweaver, keep the team alive to beat the boss? And they can do that, mid-game with mid-range gear, level 50, up to 11, which isn't bad. If you want to push progress, you're going to have to upgrade your gear more. I always say not to make these videos too long, but then I just keep talking. I can't help myself. What we're going to do here is we're going to push content a little bit. We're going to go from Ice Golems 11 to Dragons 12. And I'm doing that strictly because Dragons 12 is void, and so there's no affinity advantage or disadvantage in my comparison. So I also ran this a couple times, and I had to switch out Woad Painted, who just could not handle this at all, with Handsome Jack, Harvest Jack. I'm not playing Borderlands. Switched Woad Painted out with the Harvest Jack. Harvest Jack handles these waves like a champ. His crowd control is pretty excellent. I'm very pleased with that aspect of his game. But again, healing through these phases is not that difficult, and there's only 2 heroes on here with lifesteal. Although Spirit Host has a nice beefy 50% heal on her A1, which is nice. But that's counteracted by Bellower, who has trash gear. Even though he has 2 pieces of Immortal, they're really not very good. I mean, he has some stuff that's level 8. So he's definitely down there. So the problem that we see here is not just in healing, it's DPS. Without a max enemy hit points champion and no poisons, this fight is much harder than it needs to be. So pushing this content with this team composition was going to be tricky anyway, just because gear was bad. And really, if you had like a level 60 or 2 in here, that would help too. But again, if you don't have that, if you're just, again, this is just 50s mid-game, trying to see how far we can push, I think you just need better gear. And with better gear, we'd probably take this in a team comp that had poisons or max enemy HP. Just something that would just add a little DPS. Even HP burn might have even done the trick. So What we're going to do here is fail and lose, and it's going to be sad. But Apothecary can't do it either with this team composition, unfortunately. So I think this is just the upper limit of what I can accomplish with this gear set and with these champions in this dungeon. That's the breaks. You live and learn and you move on. And you try to find a way to improve. Of course, I'm not really worried about it personally because, I have a core team of 60s that I focus all my energies on, but this is just an example for people who are mid-game trying to push. Some things to look out for is just better gear, better team composition. This is just an example of why it makes it difficult when you don't keep those things in mind when you build a team. And an Apothecary failing too just shows that I don't know that there's as big a difference between those two champions as it's made out to be. What I think the difference is, my hypothesis, because I don't have either of them at level 60, I think at level 60, and in certain situations, his large spot heal that crits is just more clutch. I think he's probably just a more clutch champion in arenas when you need to keep someone from dying. In high-level dungeons, you need to keep someone from dying. They got really low. Maybe his big clutch heal is more important than Hexweaver's warm, cuddly blanket of affection that she bestows upon everybody. That's probably the way it is. I don't know because I haven't experienced that type of content yet, but that's my guess. I think that's probably why people like Apothecary more, is because of his clutch abilities. Because personally, I think Hexweaver performs overall just as well as Apothecary does. But I think it's more clutch versus consistency. So what do you think? Is it clutch versus consistency? Is it Hexweaver's speed boost and crit boost less desirable than Apothecary's speed plus turn meter? Maybe that scales better. Maybe that's more useful. Maybe crit, you don't need as you get better gear, you don't need so much crit on a skill because you're having it on your gear. Another consideration. I can totally see that, but I've also seen times, in dungeons when I've had 3 champions on the verge of death, and I have Apothecary, and the AI has to decide who to save. Whereas Hexweaver, you wouldn't have to. It would just be like, you're all fine. Don't worry about it. I got you. So these are all considerations. I guess my main point is, you don't need to hold out for Apothecary, right? You're like, I can't really progress. I really need an Apothecary to get by. You don't. I think that there are many other viable healers that we can use, and I would like to test some more. I want to see. I like Painkeeper. I want to see how Painkeeper compares with Mother Superior. They look similar too. Maybe I'll chase down that particular rabbit down his rabbit hole at a certain time. Who knows? Possibilities here are endless. The only limit is resources, and those are hard to come by in this game. But I will do this as often as I can because I really do enjoy this type of content. And I hope you do too. And if you do, throw a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. That'd be fantastic. I'd love it. And I also want to hear from you. Put your thoughts down in the comments below. So maybe there's something I just haven't thought of and another consideration. All right. Again, I'm talking too long. Guys, thank you so much. Take care, and I will see you next time.